Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're watching this. It is for Tuesday, the 14th, and we are working on solve multiplication and division equations. And our standard is use algebra to solve multiplication and division equations. So we will be finding the value of the variable. So let's go ahead and read this together. A multiplication equation shows a variable multiplied by a number. A division equation shows a variable divided by a number. To solve a multiplication equation, you use the division property of equality. To solve a division equation, you use the multiplication property of equality. These properties state that both sides of an equation remain equal when you multiply or divide them both sides by the same number. Okay, so let's look at the two examples they have here. Then we will try two examples together and you can try the rest on your own. Solve and check. Example 1, a divided by 5 equals 6. So remember, when we have a fraction and there's a number or variable, it doesn't matter. Whenever there's a fraction symbol or it's set up as a fraction, that means division. So we have a over 5. We can also read it as a divided by 5. So when we do this division, whatever the value of a is, it should equal to a value of 6 as the equation. So the other example on this side shows 2.5 times x. So remember, a number next to a variable means times. We're multiplying. Equals 10. So step 1, look at the side with the variable. Use the inverse operation to get the variable by itself. So remember when we set up the inverse operation here on the top right a few videos ago, it said multiplication, inverse is division, addition, inverse is subtraction. That's the same thing we are doing here. So here we're working with division and multiplication. So for that means we need to, if we have division, as is here with the first example, to get the variable by itself, so we know the value, we would need to do the inverse of division, which is multiplication. For here, when we have multiplication, we need to do the inverse of that division to find the answer. And when you're finding the answer for these equations, you can always use a calculator if you need it. Now, this one, it says a divided by 5 equals 6. So we need to multiply both sides by 5. So one thing that helps me out is setting it up as 5 over 1. Because how many a's do we have here? We have one a. So it'd be 1/5 a. So when we want to multiply, we would multiply by 5 over 1, which is the reciprocal, which is very simple to remember because when we divide fractions, we always multiply by the reciprocal. Okay, and this would cancel out to 1 over 1, leaving us with just a by itself, and then we would just multiply here. And remember, if the denominator is 1, we can always just leave that without the denominator because that's invisible. So let's jump down here. Simplify both sides of the equation. So when they simplified, they canceled out those 5s. Those would just end up being 1s. And 1s could be invisible, so we can just rewrite it with only a by itself. So a is by itself, a equals, and then when we multiply 6 times 5, we get 30. So that means a's value has to be 30. Then at the last step, they said check your answer. So we rewrite the equation with the variable, then we use our substitution method and we substitute the variable for the value, which was 30, and then we check, does it equal the same thing? Well, 30 divided by 5 equals 6. 6 equals 6, check, that's correct. So a equals 30 is the solution. Let's look at the other side for what they did. So remember, they had to divide to get the variable by itself. So 2.5 divided by 2.5. And the best way to set this up is showing the fraction symbol. You could put 2.5x divided by 2.5 equals 10 divided by 2.5. That would be the same thing, but a quicker version is just drawing the fraction line to show your division. Either or would work. So whichever you would feel more comfortable with, you can do. Now we have 2.5x equals 10. We divided both sides to make sure it is balanced. Divide both sides by 2.5, which x ends up being by itself because this would cancel out to 1, this would cancel out to 1, and then so x equals 4. When we divided this, it equaled 4. And then last thing to do is just check the equation using the substitution method. So 2.5 times x equals 10. 2.5 times 4, does that equal 10? That's why there's a question mark. Yes, 10 equals 10. So x equals 4 is the solution. Okay, let's go ahead and solve the first one together. So we right now have 3 times x equals 42. Inverse of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide both sides using my fraction line by 3. That means the x will end up by itself because this will cancel out to 1 over 1, which we can just write 1x as x. And then x will equal 14. 3 goes into 4 1 time, 10 times. And then 3 goes into 40 10 times. 3 goes into 12, that's going to be left over 4 times. So x equals 14. And they do want us to check. So on your side, let's go ahead and check right here. Put the question mark. So 3 times 14, does that equal 42? Well, if you're unsure, go ahead and multiply it out right there. 3 times 4, 12, carry the 1. 3 times 1, 3 plus 1, 4. Yes. So the solution has to be x equals 14. All right. Let's try this one down here together. So we have z divided by 6 equals 9. So we need to use the inverse, which would be by multiplying. So I'm setting up my multiplication with my parentheses, and I'm multiplying by 6. But remember what we did earlier? We did 6 over 1, which is the reciprocal of 1/6. Because how many z's are here? Just 1. So that would cancel out this side to just 1, which z equals, and then we would just multiply 9 times 6 gets us 54. 54 divided by 1, we could just write it as 54. So that would be our answer, but we want to make sure we're checking our work with our substitution method. So 54 divided by 6, does that equal 9? Well, 54 divided by 6, that is 9. 9 equals 9. Checked it. Awesome. All right, try the rest of this page. Come back and check your work. Okay, let's check our work. So for number 2, the answer was C equals 12. Number 3, D equals 4. And remember, make sure you check your work on the side. Number 4, W equals 8. Number 6, because we did number 5 together. Number 6, D equals 20. Number 7, N equals 26.4. And for number 8, K equals 5. For number 8, there was an extra step. So we did multiply by the reciprocal of 4/5, so 5 over 4. Okay, 5 over 5 will cancel out to 1 over 1. 4 over 4 cancel out to 1 over 1, leaving K by itself. Awesome. Then we have to multiply our numerators. 5 times 12, because there is a visible 1 underneath 12. So 5 times 12 gives us 60. Then we have to bring the fraction that divided by 4 with it. Then we have to divide. 60 divided by 4 will give us 15. So K has to equal 15. If you have this answer, that is partially it, but you want to try to get to a whole number or hopefully a decimal. Don't always leave it as a fraction, especially if you can reduce it. And then showing my work right here, it was also a little different. So I had to put 12 equals 4/5 times the value of K, which was 15. 12 equals, well, multiply the numerators. 4 times 15 gave us 60. Okay, and then 60 divided by 5 will give us 12. Checked it off. It equals the correct answer, which is our solution. Let's try the back of the page. Okay, number 1, let's read it together. Spencer divided his baseball cards equally among 4 friends. Each friend received 16 cards. To find the number of cards C that Spencer had originally, he solved the equation C equals C divided by 4. Equals 16. I'm rewriting that because I know I will need it. How many baseball cards did Spencer originally have? So rewrite the equation they gave us, and then we'll just solve the equation to find what the variable C represents. So we are multiplying by the reciprocal of 1 over 4 because there's a visible 1 over here. Do the same thing on both sides. We will be left with C because 4 divided by 4 will yield us just 1 over 1. So C equals the 16 times 4. I'm going to go ahead and multiply it here on the side so I make sure I have my work. 4 times 6 will give us 24. Carry the 2. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 2 will be 6. So it'd be 64 over 1, but we can just write it as 64. So C has to equal 64, which is right here. Interesting. C equals 64. C is our answer. Perfect. Try the rest of this page, come back and check your answers. Okay, let's check our answers. So for number 2, the answer was A, 2.6. That's my work there. Make sure you had your work too. Just because it's multiple choice does not mean we should only have our multiple choice answer. We need to show our work. If there's times where we don't need to show our work, if I don't have work here, you didn't need to show work. If I have work here, you should be showing work. For number 3, the answer was A also. Number 4, the answer was D. Then for number 5, you had to make an equation. So we had 6 times D. And I did say let D represent distance in feet. So I knew what D was representing. Equals the 5,280. And that had to equal the amount of feet because we're using that number. Then we needed to divide both sides by 6 because we started with multiplication. Inverse of multiplying is division. And then we found the value of D, which equals 880 feet. For number 6, it was similar to number 5. You had to make an equation, solve the equation. So we had 3/4 times W equals the 12 for the ounces. And I did write down, let W represent weight in ounces. Make sure you wrote that down so I know what your variable represents. Then we multiplied both sides by the reciprocal of 3/4, so 4/3, 4/3. 12 times 4, multiply your numerators, gives us 48. But we need to bring down divided by 3. 48 divided by 3 will give us 16, and that's 16 ounces. That's our final answer. All right, reminder, if you have done your work on a separate line piece of paper, make sure you label the lesson number, put your name on it and the title, and submit that through Google Classroom. It's okay, you do not need to print the pages. If you want to use separate line paper, don't forget you can do that. Make sure you put your answers, show your work. Okay, have a great rest of your day. See you tomorrow. Bye.